Welcome to NTD Good Morning. Here are today's top stories. Atlanta police apprehend a man they say was planning to shoot up the city's airport. How a call from family members averted the potential tragedy. An appeals court is allowing President Trump to send National Guard troops into Portland, Oregon. Why the judges say the administration is justified in the deployment. President Trump signs a rare earth minerals deal with Australia, part of an effort to curb dependence on China. And with the shutdown at 21 days, it becomes the second longest in history. Senate Leader John Thune will try a new approach this week aimed at getting some federal workers paid. Department of Homeland Security says that ICE is still prioritizing the worst of the worst. Secretary Kristi Noem provides the latest arrest numbers. And the Toronto Blue Jays are back in the World Series for the first time in over 30 years after a clutch 3-run homer lifted them past the Mariners.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephania Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Today is Tuesday, October 21st, and you're watching NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, police in Atlanta say a man was arrested after threatening to shoot up the Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Authorities identified the suspect as 49-year-old Billy Joe Cagle of Cartersville, Georgia. Here's Atlanta's police chief.
How are you? How did you get, what are your reasons at the airport right now?
We want to?
Why are you at the airport?
Oh, I'm just here. What I heard?
Cartersville Police Department was alerted by the family of Mr. Cagle that he was streaming on social media, that he was headed to the airport, in their words, to shoot it up. And the family stated that he was in possession of an assault rifle. We're here today briefing you on a success and not a tragedy, because a family saw something and said something.
Police say Cagle is a convicted felon. Officers found him at the airport and took him into custody without anyone being hurt, thankfully. Investigators say they found an AR-15 rifle and 27 rounds of ammunition in his pickup truck parked just outside. Cagle faces multiple charges, including making terroristic threats and possession of a firearm by a felon. In a major legal victory for the Trump administration, a federal court has cleared the way for President Trump to deploy the National Guard troops to Portland. Here's more on that ruling.
A federal appeals court has ruled President Trump can deploy National Guard troops into Portland, despite opposition from local and state leaders. Trump on September 27th had ordered 200 National Guard troops to the city. The 3-judge panel from the Ninth Circuit granted the Justice Department's request to lift a lower court block on the deployment. The court said the move was an appropriate response after protesters damaged a federal building and threatened ICE officers. But one judge dissented, warning that allowing troops over what she called merely inconvenient protests is dangerous. Oregon's Attorney General also criticized the ruling, saying it puts the country on a dangerous path. White House officials praised the decision, saying Trump is protecting federal property and personnel. Trump has defended his right to send troops. Over the weekend, he once again raised the possibility of invoking the Insurrection Act, something he called the strongest power a president has. He told Fox News the act gives presidents a, quote, unquestioned power, but that he chooses not to use it. In Portland, protesters reacted with a mix of caution and defiance. Some wore costumes and said they're ready for the challenge.
Bring 'em. I mean, Portland's up for the challenge, as you can see. We're ready to do anything it takes.
Some worry that troops from outside the state could escalate tensions, but others believe there can be mutual respect between protesters and the troops.
Of course, I think on both sides we have oddballs here and there, right? On both sides, but as long as we can be peaceful people, we are great.
Portland officials argue protests have been small and peaceful, with few arrests since June, and a lower court judge previously found no evidence that the city was experiencing a rebellion or that protests seriously interfere with law enforcement. As the legal fight continues, the administration is also launching new security operations elsewhere, including a Coast Guard deployment along the Rio Grande. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says Operation Riverwall will involve hundreds of personnel and more than 100 boats in Texas. Officials say since Trump took office, Border Patrol has recorded its lowest arrest numbers since 1970. Data from Homeland Security shows the number of apprehensions made at the border has dropped 95% since the Biden years.
Democratic senators last evening blocked the government funding bill for an 11th time. The shutdown is at 21 days now, the second longest in history. Many predict it will stretch further than 35 days, the longest one ever. Senate Leader John Thune is trying a new approach this week, and NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the story.
50-43, a failed vote that's now become routine in the Senate. Democrats, for an 11th time on Monday, tanked a clean resolution to fund the government at the demand of their health care goals.
But that agreement actually needs to meet the needs of the American people and improve the quality of life of everyday Americans, while at the same time decisively addressing the health care crisis that Republicans have created.
Obamacare subsidies and walking back Medicaid cuts at the top of their priorities. Republicans, though, reject the $1.5 trillion demand.
They were catering to the same radical base that is just days away from electing an open Marxist as mayor of New York City. And now that Chuck Schumer has had his spectacle, he's had his big protest against America, this is our plea. We're asking, and I think everybody in this room and everybody watching, listening to our voices this morning should be hoping that he is finally now ready to go to work and end this shutdown.
A new divide emerged on Monday around a proposal to partially pay federal workers during the shutdown, with some Democrats already rejecting what they called the GOP's attempt to pick and choose who gets paid.
If they're open for paying all federal workers, then why don't they just reopen the government?
Republican leader John Thune this week is expected to bring up a bill to pay troops and some federal workers during the shutdown. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And President Trump has moved allocated funds around to ensure the military were paid on October 15th during the government shutdown. Joining us to discuss is Chris Lovell. He's a retired U.S. Marine Corps major. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris. The Trump administration has been quite clever in its attempts to keep paychecks and other forms of reliefs flowing to active duty military during the shutdown. Can you describe the various tactics you've seen used to keep that money flowing?
Sure. Good morning, Kerry. Great to be on with you this morning. The way they paid the troops on this last payday on the 15th it was a little unorthodox, but it was really, I think it was well within the appropriations law. It was appropriated for, they used $8 billion that were originally appropriated for by Congress for research and development, DARPA, long-term investment in military technology programs and developing, small businesses that are focused on, high-tech weapons, things like that. They moved that money to pay the troops, and I think that was a win, because even though Congress needs to approve, they do hold the purse string. They do to not pay the troops. I think would have been catastrophic, not just for morale, but just kind of just the general public. Right, the troops are folks that sign up. They want hardship, they want adversity, right? But their families to not maybe for their families to worry about whether they're going to get paid on the 15th or not. I don't think they signed up for that. And I think the American public really would have soured on that. So I think they did the right thing by moving the funds from another Department of Defense, Department of War, department to kind of stay this, government shutdown and the issue with the pay. But I think now the matter at hand is they got paid. That's great. Now the matter at hand is, are they going to get paid on the 1st? Right. So I think we're depending on our representatives to get it done, to work together across the aisle, shake hands, figure it out, and get a continuing resolution or a budget resolution finished so the troops don't have to worry about it for a second payday.
Yeah, in the event that they can't do either of those, is there enough creative cash flow to get them paid on the 1st?
Sure. I think the administration has made it clear they're going to support the troops. In the small chance that they don't get paid, there are some great programs out there that will support these great patriots, right? With zero interest loans for like the Star Card program for the Department of Defense commissaries. A lot of the credit unions have offered these temporary low interest loans for kind of to stay the gap between not getting paid and when they actually do get paid. But seriously, again, not necessary, because our troops sign up for adversity, do great things for really not a lot of pay. And to worry about not getting paid is a non-starter.
Agreed there. And I was hoping you could elaborate on the Star Card program and its use in the commissaries so that people who are, like myself, unfamiliar with it can know how that supports military and their families.
Yeah, sure, Kerry. So the Star Card is it's a credit card. It's a low interest credit card it's a program in the Department of Defense for active duty members to use in the commissaries, the exchanges, and some of the MWR, morale, welfare, recreation programs. It's low interest, unlike other credit cards, 12 to 21%. It's really low interest. For this shutdown, they extended a zero interest for, I think, 90 days to where, you could buy if you needed to with no interest. And then when you started paying your card, when you make a monthly payment on it, it'll be applied to the higher interest balance first before the zero interest balance. So I think it's a great program. There's many relief valves for the active duty military and their families in the off chance that we do have another payday issue.
Got it. So are these commissaries pretty vital in day-to-day for military families, would you say?
Sure. In some cases, they're the only, they're the only place to get, groceries. If you're overseas, I mean, you can go off the military installation to buy off the local economy, but sometimes it gets expensive depending on the dollar exchange rate. So yeah, these are very vital for the troops and their families.
And some in Congress on both sides of the aisle have commented that, of course, they're glad that the military are getting paid, but they're unhappy with Trump's approach to go around Congress. As you mentioned, Congress does have the power of the purse. So what would you say in your thoughts on that?
I would say it's one thing to thank the military for their service. It's another thing just to back it and just do the right thing with the power you have in representation for your district to say, hey, let's really make the rubber meet the road with our support of the troops and make sure that we maybe pass a special resolution to ensure that no matter what happens with the government shutdown, that our troops are always paid. I think they put a lot on the line. They signed up for a commitment for really little pay and a lot of danger, right? And so we love these folks, right? We want to make sure that they don't have to worry about, am I being supported? I think it would be a little bit of a morale issue if this goes into, they have to worry about, another payday. So thankfully it was done. The Trump administration did, use the funds in a creative way. And it's an easy backfill once back to research and development once the budget is passed. But at the end of the day, I think they did the right thing. You're always going to have the Monday morning quarterbacks, but the troops don't see it that way. They're very appreciative of their commander-in-chief and Secretary of War doing the right thing to make sure that them and their families are paid.
We appreciate you sharing your insights with us this morning. And of course, we'll be looking to see if the shutdown can be averted or if more creativity will be needed for payroll at the end of this month. Chris Lovell, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Gary.
And President Trump and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese signed a rare earths agreement yesterday in efforts to curb dependence on China. It outlines plans to jointly invest more than $3 billion in critical mineral projects over the next 6 months. And the president floating possible actions against the Chinese regime ahead of his meeting with dictator Xi Jinping in South Korea. NTD Washington correspondent Mari Otsu brings us more.
President Trump and Prime Minister Albanese of Australia signed a joint deal on rare earths in an effort to reduce the U.S.'s dependence on China. The deal involves the mining, processing, and exporting of rare earths from Australia to the U.S.
We're doing a real job on rare earth and many other things.
China dominates the global rare earth supply chain, and as China imposes tougher export rules on its own critical minerals, President Trump says the U.S. is working with other nations to build a supply chain independent of China.
Part of this deal is very specific, $8.5 billion pipeline.
In about a year from now, we'll have so much critical mineral and rare earths that you won't know what to do with them. They'll be worth about $2.
And ahead of his expected meeting with Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping in South Korea, President Trump restates his additional 100% tariff threat on China.
If we don't make a deal, I'm putting on an additional 100% on November 1st. They threatened us with rare earths, and I threatened them with tariffs.
Floats export restrictions.
I could also threaten them with many other things, like airplanes. They can't get parts for their airplanes. We build their airplanes.
And demands.
I want them to buy soybeans. They stopped buying our soybeans. This China's going to buy soybeans. I want China to stop with the fentanyl. I don't want them to play the rare earth game with us.
Meanwhile, on Israel, while Israel and Hamas are accusing each other of violating the ceasefire, President Trump says a truce is still in place, but warns Hamas to, quote, be good or...
And if they're not, we're going to go in, we're going to eradicate them. They'll be eradicated, and they know that. And they did things that they shouldn't be doing, and if they keep doing it, then we're going to go in and straighten it out, and it'll happen very quickly and pretty violently.
This is as Vice President J.D. Vance is heading to Israel to push for the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire, and President Trump again reiterates that there will be no U.S. boots on the ground in Gaza.
In the Middle East, fighting broke out in the Gaza Strip yesterday between Israel and the Hamas terrorist group during the ceasefire. Vice President J.D. Vance has arrived in Israel this morning and is set to meet with officials in Israel over the challenges facing the region. NTD's Jason Perry brings us the details.
The Israel Defense Forces reported shooting several terrorists in the Gaza Strip on Monday. Israel said the terrorists had crossed the yellow line, behind which Israeli troops have withdrawn in accordance with the ceasefire agreement. And afterwards, Israel released a video of troops placing yellow markers on the ground in Gaza and said they have begun marking the yellow line in the Gaza Strip to establish tactical clarity on the ground. This comes just a day after fighting broke out in the territory between Israel and the Hamas terrorist group. On Sunday, terrorists attacked and killed 2 Israeli soldiers, and in response, Israeli forces struck terrorist targets in the area to, quote, eliminate the threat. And after Sunday's clashes, both Israel and Hamas recommitted to the ceasefire plan brokered by President Trump. However, Monday's shooting came afterwards. Some residents in the Gaza Strip shared their thoughts on the situation.
There should be concerns as long as there are matters yet to be settled. There is still a yellow line and a red line. There is no Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Of course, we have to be afraid.
They said there is a truce, and we wanted to return to our homes. We wanted to return safely, but there is no safety. This is not a life. This is not a life.
Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he was going to meet with Vice President J.D. Vance in Israel on Tuesday.
We will discuss 2 issues, mainly 2 issues, about the security challenges we are facing and the diplomatic opportunities we are facing. We will overcome the challenges and will realize the opportunities. Thanks to our power and continued cooperation with the President of the United States, I believe we will reach more peace agreements with countries in the region.
Netanyahu also added that Israel is working nonstop to try to secure the return of the bodies of the 16 hostages that remain in the Gaza Strip. This comes as the Hamas terrorist group returned one more body, said to be that of a deceased hostage. And it was taken to Israel's Forensic Institute in Tel Aviv for identification. And on the same day, the body of Nepalese hostage Bipin Joshi arrived in Kathmandu. Joshi was studying agriculture in Israel when Hamas terrorists kidnapped him during the October 7th attacks. Nepal's foreign ministry said Joshi's body would be taken to his hometown on Monday evening. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The U.S. and Russia are making progress towards a summit between their 2 leaders. President Trump is set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Hungary. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest.
Right now, the priority of the European Union is rightly directed towards the war in Ukraine.
European allies are meeting in Slovenia on Monday. French President Emmanuel Macron says the group, known as the Coalition of the Willing, is set to meet again on Friday.
As for us, we continue to advance at Ukraine's side, which is resisting bravely. I think that we must not submit to any of the latest disinformation. Ukraine is continuing to resist with a great deal of courage by continuing to innovate, to produce.
This week, we aim to adopt a major new sanctions package on Russia. Every euro we deny Russia is one that it can't use on war.
Meanwhile, Moscow and Washington are making progress towards a summit between the two leaders. President Trump is set to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in Hungary. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had a phone call on Monday. They reportedly discussed a bilateral agenda of Russia-U.S. relations, including economic and geopolitical ties. Russia's Lavrov says the conversation was, quote, constructive. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Japan has a new prime minister. Conservative lawmaker Sanae Takaichi has been elected as the country's first female leader. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on the historic milestone for one of the world's most patriarchal societies.
The Japanese parliament elected Takaichi yesterday after she won 237 votes in the 465-seat lower house. A close ally of the late former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and an admirer of Britain's Margaret Thatcher, Takaichi is expected to push Japan further to the right on immigration and social policy. She takes office as Japan faces mounting economic troubles and political gridlock. Tackling the soaring cost of living will be among her top challenges. The price of rice, a staple food, has nearly doubled since last year. Her victory comes just days before President Trump's scheduled visit to Tokyo. Trump praised Takaichi as a highly respected person of great wisdom and strength. And U.S. Ambassador George Glass congratulated her on making history, saying under her and President Trump's strong leadership, the U.S.-Japan partnership will reach new heights in security, technology, energy, and trade. Markets have already responded to what analysts call the Takaichi trade. Expectations of higher government spending have driven the Nikkei index to record highs, but also raised concerns about Japan's massive national debt. Takaichi was later approved by the upper house and will be sworn in today as Japan's 104th prime minister. She replaces Shigeru Ishiba, who resigned after election losses. Takaichi is a veteran lawmaker and former economic security minister. She has served in Japan's parliament for nearly 3 decades. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And coming up, the Supreme Court adds 3 new cases to its docket. One of them involves a law that blocks users of illegal drugs from possessing firearms. And the Department of Homeland Security says that ICE is still prioritizing the worst of the worst. Secretary Kristi Noem provides the latest arrest numbers. We're going to have that and more. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says the worst of the worst is still a high priority for ICE. Noem made a stop in Florida yesterday, highlighting what she called the good work that law enforcement officers are doing. NTD correspondent Jason Blair brings us that story.
Across the country, we're making communities safer so that families can thrive and they can prosper and they can enjoy the kind of freedom that this country was established to provide.
DHS Secretary Kristi Noem says that ICE is still prioritizing the, quote, worst of the worst criminal illegal aliens. Noem highlights some recent arrests in the Sarasota, Florida area.
The convicted murderer, whose name is Eric Carlos Artiles Ramos, an illegal alien who was from Cuba. Oscar Alfredo Retena Marroquin, an illegal alien from El Salvador. He was convicted of sexual assault against a child.
9 months into the Trump administration's immigration enforcement efforts, Noem says that the DHS has arrested over 480,000 illegal immigrants.
70% of those individuals have criminal charges against them or have been convicted of those criminal charges.
Noem also says some words of thanks to law enforcement.
Thank you for all that you do to protect our country. Thank you for risking your lives for the American people and being willing to go out and stand for what is right, stand for law and order.
And the DHS has received criticism from House Democrats for a recent purchase of 2 Coast Guard aircrafts. In a letter to Noem from Democrats on the House Appropriations Committee, Reps. Rosa DeLauro and Lauren Underwood write, "It has come to our attention that in the midst of a government shutdown, the United States Coast Guard entered into a sole source contract with Gulfstream Aerospace Corporation to procure 2 new G700 luxury jets to support travel for you and the Deputy Secretary at a cost to the taxpayer of $200 million. Secretary Noem responds.
These aircraft are Coast Guard aircraft to replace 25-year-old airplanes that are necessary for the mission of the Coast Guard. Congress appropriated the dollars and paid for them in the big, beautiful bill, and we're grateful that we're able to move forward.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Thanks to Jason for that report. Attorneys for former FBI Director James Comey filed motions yesterday in an effort to have the 2-count federal indictment against him dismissed. Comey was charged in September with 1 count of making false statements to Congress and 1 count of obstruction of justice. His attorney calls the indictment a vindictive and unlawful prosecution. He's also challenging the appointment of interim U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan. Meanwhile, the Justice Department may seek to have Comey's attorney disqualified. They say he was involved in an alleged plan by Comey to leak information to the media after President Trump fired him in 2017. And the Supreme Court has agreed to hear 3 new cases, including an appeal by the Trump administration regarding a law that prohibits users of illegal drugs from possessing firearms. NTD's Arlene Richards has that story.
A law that was used to convict Hunter Biden is the subject of an appeal by the Trump administration. The disputed law bars anyone from possessing a gun if they are an unlawful user of or addicted to any controlled substance. A lower court concluded that the gun ban can only be applied if people are accused of being intoxicated by drugs and armed at the same time. The Trump administration is generally supportive of Second Amendment rights, but argues that applying the ban to drug users is a reasonable restriction. The man who challenged the law was facing a felony conviction for illegal gun possession after the FBI found a firearm and illegal drugs in a search of his home. The government's petition described the man as a drug dealer who uses illegal drugs. The man's attorney says the ban puts millions of Americans who have tried marijuana at risk. Around half of U.S. states have legalized the recreational use of marijuana, but it remains illegal under federal law. The other cases coming before the court involve the definition of a transportation worker and disclosing civil claims in bankruptcy filings. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Florida's Attorney General has issued criminal subpoenas to the gaming platform Roblox, accusing the company of putting children at risk. Attorney General James Utmeyer says Roblox has become a breeding ground for predators. He says the subpoenas will help prosecutors gather evidence about predators using the platform to contact and then groom minors. Florida is the 3rd state to take legal action against Roblox after Louisiana and Kentucky filed similar claims this year. Roblox has long faced questions over children's safety. In a statement to the Epoch Times, Roblox said it shares the Attorney General's commitment to keeping kids safe and will cooperate with investigators. The company says it uses filters, age estimation tools, and AI monitoring to detect and remove harmful content. And Amazon Web Services returned to normal operations on Monday afternoon. That was after a major internet outage that disrupted thousands of sites worldwide, including some of the web's most popular apps like Snapchat and Reddit. Here's the story.
Despite being back online, Amazon says some AWS systems are still working through a backlog of messages, which could take a few hours to process. The outage had a global impact. AWS powers applications and systems for companies across the world, and the disruption left workers from London to Tokyo offline. Everyday tasks, from paying a hairdresser to rescheduling flights, were suddenly halted. Even on Monday afternoon, users reported lingering issues with services like digital wallet Venmo and video calling site Zoom. This marks the most significant internet disruption since last year's CrowdStrike malfunction, which crippled hospitals, banks, and airports, underscoring just how fragile the interconnected digital world can be. It was at least the 3rd major incident in 5 years linked to AWS's US East 1 data center in Northern Virginia. Amazon did not address a request for more clarity on why this particular region keeps getting affected. The root of the problem was traced to the Domain Name System, or DNS, which prevented applications from finding the correct address for AWS's DynamoDB API, a cloud database, critical for storing data.
A false alarm that led to an emergency landing. An American Airlines flight yesterday landed in Nebraska after pilots thought someone was trying to break into the cockpit. The flight took off from Omaha's Eppley Airfield, bound for Los Angeles, but turned around just minutes later. The pilot could not communicate with flight attendants and heard someone outside the cockpit door. American Airlines later said the mix-up happened because the plane's intercom had been left on by accident. The pilots mistook the noise from the intercom for a possible break-in. The Omaha Airport Authority said there was no security-related incident and directed all questions to American Airlines. Meanwhile, new information suggests a diverted flight last week may have been struck by a weather balloon. A United Airlines flight was forced to divert to Salt Lake City after an object struck and cracked its windshield at 36,000 feet, injuring the pilot. United says the Boeing 737 MAX 8 landed safely with 134 passengers on board. A company called Windborne Systems released a statement saying it might have been one of their weather balloons. The company says it's working with the FAA and transportation safety agents as this investigation continues. Moving on, multiple Ivy League and prominent state schools have declined the Trump administration's Compact for Academic Excellence in Higher Education. The deadline for offering feedback was yesterday. The compact offers financial incentives, such as preferred consideration for federal grants and flexibility in research costs if the school promises to follow certain guidelines. The guidelines include eliminating preferential treatment by race, requiring the SAT scores in student applications, and limiting undergraduate admissions of foreign students to 15%, as well as freezing tuition for the next 5 years. Other conditions are maintaining a policy of institutional neutrality and political and social issues and accepting all transfer credits from military members and veterans. So far, at least 7 of 9 universities have refused the compact, including Brown, MIT, the University of Pennsylvania, and Dartmouth. Vanderbilt University and the University of Texas were still considering the offer. And the Trump administration has struck a deal with the American Federation of Teachers to provide student debt relief for eligible borrowers. Joining us live now to discuss is Aaron Boxer. He's a former special education teacher, as well as the CEO of Diversified Education Services. It's good to see you, Aaron. Thanks for joining. Is this a reversal in position for the Trump administration, not only to give students relief, but also to work with the American Federation of Teachers?
Yes, the Trump administration struck a landmark deal with the American Federation of Teachers, and it finally delivers some real debt relief for millions of borrowers who've done everything right. And this agreement, it clears a years-long logjam in loan forgiveness for teachers, nurses, other public service workers, and income-driven repayment plans. So after years of bureaucracy, borrowers are finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
So I want to unpack this a little bit because during the Biden administration, conservatives and Republicans were against the proposals of the Biden administration to try to rearrange student debt. How is this different?
Good question. The Biden plan was an executive action, and it bypassed Congress and was struck down by the Supreme Court. The new Trump-era agreement is a court-approved settlement with the teachers union, meaning it's rooted in existing law, not presidential decree. So instead of an across-the-board cancellation, it targets borrowers already in qualified repayment programs. It's a legal, negotiated fix rather than a unilateral policy.
Now, the Trump and the teachers union have been at odds on a range of things. Maybe you could highlight where their differences still lie and how they were able to find common ground in this deal.
Yeah, they've been going back and forth for years on this, and it seems like anything that is Trump initiated is something that people don't like and don't want. It wouldn't surprise me if some people actually forego their ability to forgive their loans, which is a factor that some people might take into consideration when it comes to taxes. But it shows a pragmatic shift towards problem solving between the two sides. The administration isn't promising blanket handouts, not acting like a monarchy, and they're clearing out red tape and they're honoring commitments that were already made. It's a business-minded fix. It shows that the two sides can come to an agreement. And I think that should boost confidence for the American electorate in a system that injects accountability back into education policy, but also into negotiating.
Now let's dig a little deeper into what this means for the actual borrowers in practical terms.
Let's talk about tax implications, right? If any for student loans who have debt to rescind. Forgiving student debt remains tax-free federally through 2025, thanks to some earlier yet fiscally irresponsible American Rescue Plan provisions. It means borrowers aren't going to get blindsided by a surprise IRS bill. The administration made sure forgiveness counts on when borrowers became eligible, not when the paperwork clears. That's a smart move because it prevents a financial whiplash, and I think it also increases confidence in people that really doubt the honorability and legality of what this current administration does. Some states might differ, but federally, when it comes to taxes, this is true financial freedom.
And that's positive news, and certainly any breakthrough in the collaboration between the Trump administration and one of the largest unions in the country, the teachers union, seems like that is progress. I want to get your take on the previous story where we were talking about the Trump administration offering preferential federal aid to schools should they go along with what seems like relatively neutral terms. They want freezing tuition for the next 5 years, to use the SATs, neutrality on political issues. Why do you think, unpack that for us a little bit. Why are most of the universities, and these are the Ivy League, rejecting that offer?
As I said before, I truly believe that Trump derangement syndrome is something real, something that the administration has actually dedicated money towards. Anything that Donald Trump puts his hands on is something that tends to get rejected, especially by some of the more left-leaning organizations, which what academia is. And I think the Trump administration has been following along specifically with what the law says, referencing back to what Biden did during his administration, trying to make some blanket forgiveness for everyone was a clear way to try and gather in voters. The pivot for the Trump administration, moving from blocking forgiveness plans to endorsing tax relief, trying to work with these Ivy League schools, they're trying to show this pragmatic, bipartisan side to fixing what many saw as a broken system. And these Ivy Leagues and these other left-leaning institutions, they are not interested in giving Trump any victories, because when they do come to agreement, it's a win for everyone, but there's this aim to just undercut everything that Donald Trump is doing.
And staying with that, Trump took a very aggressive approach with Harvard, and in the negotiations with them, he's, maybe you could unpack this for me a little bit more, but it appears he's making Harvard, or suggesting to Harvard, to make investments in trade schools. It seems like a bit of an irony since it's the most elite, or among the most elite universities in the world. Can you comment on that?
Yes. Going more towards trade schools and a trade school approach, let's not forget that Cornell University has a hotel management division. They have a whole section where you can go to Cornell and go work in the hotel industry. A trade school, right, which might be some of becoming an electrician, becoming a plumber. I don't think people usually imagine, I want to go to Harvard and become a contractor. But because of what happened with student loans, when they were also, the schools were giving out these degrees where students weren't making any money. They were coming out with a social justice degree thinking that there were 57 genders, and then found out that they couldn't even make what the high school median was in terms of income. So encouraging Harvard to come up with a trade school might not be traditional, but it is aligned with the message that we want to make sure that when our students graduate, that they have the ability to earn some income, especially if they're going to take on this incredible debt that the colleges have benefited for generations.
And I want to get your comments on school choice. My understanding is that the teachers union has not been as a proponent of that, saying that it leaves behind marginalized communities where, students who are local to a particular school are best served by that local school. School choice gives them the opportunity to bypass their local school. Is this new cooperation between the Trump administration's Ed Department and the teachers union potentially a sign that they could find agreement on that as well?
I really hope so. This is directly related to money. So it doesn't surprise me that the other side of the Trump administration, coming from some of the unions, is all excited for this. But when it comes to school choice, that threatens their power. Yes, you can make the link that money is connected to power, but I don't see much changing when it comes to school choice, because what school choice does, it creates competition. Competition is one of the foundations of capitalism. So if one person is competing at this level and someone else comes up and they get to this level, everyone's trying to get better. And that's good for kids. It's good for schools. And by saying that the lower income communities are going to be the ones to suffer, that's just hyperbole. In fact, if anything, those are going to be the communities that benefit from it. Because for years, Title I schools are the ones that generally underperform. They've also been the ones that are most reliant on federal funds. So I think that we should celebrate that there's been a victory between the Trump administration and the unions when it comes to student loans. But I wouldn't get too excited about school choice becoming an area where they wind up agreeing.
Well, education certainly one of the main themes with the Trump administration. They were saying that they were going to completely eliminate the Department of Education. It looks like maybe that's not happening anytime soon, but any progress should be celebrated, and very much appreciate your insights this morning. Aaron Boxer, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
And coming up, trade talks between the U.S. and China resume this week as export restrictions and tariff threats have led to a trade war. We're going to have that and more. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here's some of today's top headlines. Government shutdown is now the second longest in history. Democrats, for an 11th time on Monday, tanked a clean resolution to fund the government. They demand extending Obamacare subsidies and walking back Medicaid cuts. Republicans continue to reject the $1.5 trillion demand. The GOP is now pivoting to another plan, paying troops and some federal workers during the shutdown. It's unclear if they will get enough support, with some Democrats already rejecting what they called the GOP's attempt to pick and choose who gets paid. Japan has elected its first female prime minister, conservative Sanae Takaichi. Takaichi is expected to steer Japan further right on social and immigration issues. She's taking office amid rising living costs and economic challenges. President Trump has praised her as a person of great wisdom and strength. President Trump and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese signed a rare earth minerals agreement aimed at reducing dependence on China. China currently dominates the global rare earth supply chain and has recently imposed stricter export rules. The deal includes plans to jointly invest over $3 billion in critical mineral projects within the next 6 months. Ahead of Trump's anticipated meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping in South Korea, he's also threatened China with an additional 100% in tariffs, export restrictions, and he's also demanded increased purchases of U.S. soybeans. The Atlanta police say 49-year-old Billy Joe Cagle is in custody after his family alerted authorities about his threats to shoot up Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Officials say the suspect is a convicted felon who has mental health challenges. Cagle is facing multiple charges, including making terrorist threats and possession of a firearm by a felon. Investigators say they found an AR-15 rifle and 27 rounds of ammunition in his truck. The FBI said it is assisting the Atlanta Police Department with the investigation. And in Portland, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals just cleared the way for National Guard deployment after a lower court blocked the move. Meanwhile, in Chicago, agents are under scrutiny for their use of force during enforcement operations. NTD's Chris Bobb was on the ground outside of the Broadview ICE Detention Center in Illinois to explain what led to the ruling in Oregon and whether it was expected.
Last week, District Judge Karen E. Murgett extended her temporary restraining order blocking the deployment of federal troops to Portland. Monday, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, which historically has a reputation of being very liberal, overturned her temporary restraining order. The court cited Title 10, which allows the president to federalize the National Guard when, quote, the president is unable, with the regular forces, to execute the laws of the United States. The ruling reads, after considering the record at this preliminary stage, we conclude that it is likely that the president lawfully exercised his statutory authority. The decision came from a divided court of 3 justices. The ruling clears the way for the Trump administration to mobilize and deploy members of the Oregon National Guard to Portland while the legal challenges continue. Federal agents are still carrying out operations here outside the Broadview ICE Detention Center in suburban Chicago. It's a part of President Trump's federal immigration enforcement efforts. Monday, the U.S. District Judge Sarah Ellis questioned ICE and CBP officials about incidents where agents reportedly pointed guns at bystanders outside an enforcement action. Judge Ellis said, quote, "You can understand how I may be concerned, right? This might be a use of force that is not commensurate with any threat that the agents are getting from people passing by." The judge also flagged incidents including agents firing tear gas at residents observing an arrest last week on the north side of Chicago, and intentionally ramming a car on the southeast side, followed by smoke grenades, pepper bullets, and tear gas deployed on bystanders. Judge Ellis has ordered federal agents to wear visible identification, issue warnings before using anti-riot weapons, and keep body cameras on during enforcement and public interactions. ICE Deputy Field Office Director Sean Byers said 75 people have been arrested for either obstructing or assaulting federal officers. CBP Deputy Incident Commander Kyle Havrick defended the agents' actions, saying they acted appropriately under these circumstances. Chris Bobb, NTD News, Chicago.
Thanks to Chris for that report. Moving on, the Chinese Communist Party is holding a Central Committee meeting this week to plan for the next 5 years, and it may include a power shakeup for regime leader Xi Jinping. That's as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he'll meet in Malaysia with China's Vice Premier this weekend. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more.
Are leadership changes coming to the Chinese Communist Party? Well, the CCP began its 4 days of meetings this week to discuss its 5-year plan on the poor state of its economy, bringing together hundreds of members of the CCP's rubber-stamped legislature. Now, the meeting's behind closed doors, but we should be on the lookout for any leadership changes. That's because last Friday, Beijing ousted its #2 general and the Army's top political officer, along with 7 other high-ranking generals. These were members of the party that were seen as part of CCP leader Xi Jinping's faction, not the opposition faction against Xi, which is powerful within the party as well. Now, this has sparked speculation that Xi Jinping may be losing power, and it also raises questions about whether this could impact China's ability to invade Taiwan, which it's been threatening to do for years. President Trump on Monday saying the CCP wouldn't dare, as the U.S. has promised to come to Taiwan's aid under a CCP invasion.
The United States is the strongest military power in the world by far. It's not even close. Nobody's going to mess with that. And I don't see that at all with President Xi. Now, that doesn't mean it's not the apple of his eye, because probably it is.
President Trump made those comments alongside the leader of Taiwan's neighboring country of Australia. And just prior to their meeting, a Chinese fighter jet released flares dangerously close to a Royal Australian Air Force plane over the South China Sea. Australia says the flares came within striking distance of the aircraft, calling the maneuver unsafe and unprofessional. And this weekend, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is set to meet with a CCP delegation in Malaysia. Now, tensions have flared as Beijing has expanded its export controls on rare earth materials used to make electronics, from smartphones to weapons. Now, in response, Trump has threatened to impose a new 100% tariff on China that would take effect on November 1st.
This is China versus the world. If China wants to be an unreliable partner to the world, then the world will have to decouple.
The U.S. is working to restore its own rare earth processing capabilities, with the latest action as President Trump Monday signing a critical minerals deal with Australia. But here at home, the U.S. is investing billions in domestic rare earth processing. In August, the federal government invested a 15% stake in U.S.-based MP Materials. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And the White House confirmed that it struck a drug shipping vessel operated by a Colombian guerrilla group. President Trump has announced new actions against the Colombian government. What do everyday Americans make of President Trump's military strikes on drug boats in the Caribbean? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
What are your thoughts on President Trump's decision to strike the drug boats off the coast of Venezuela?
They're drug runners. Who cares? Blow them out of the water. I mean, again, I was ex-Coast Guard. I did some drug interdiction. I know how that kind of goes.
Take them out. I mean, if they're bringing drugs in the country,
Why have we not been doing that from the beginning?
I think that's just a small portion of what he's taken. I mean, yeah, I think it's great he's getting rid of it, but I just don't think that's the, people behind it. I'm not sure who's behind it all.
Where's the evidence? Why is he striking these boats? What is this for? It's not a military operation as far as I can tell. It's something personal.
I think it's a little harsh when you see the boats blown up in the sea like that, but the reassuring fact is when I see the drugs in the water beside the boat, I think of all the American lives that's not going to be lost. Because I'm a fireman in my state, and I see this firsthand, all the lives that's been lost to the fentanyl, and it's a tragic thing for our country. If we were talking about someone attacking our country, what they've done with fentanyl and the drugs to the cartels, we've lost more young American lives than just about any of these memorials that you see here.
Just this past weekend, I talked to some family of victims of fentanyl poisoning, and a lot of these people are really supportive.
By the way.
Exactly. So a lot of these people are really supportive of what President Trump is doing to these drug boats. And what are your thoughts on that? What would you say?
Well, I'd like to see the evidence. I have a feeling that maybe that's true, but I haven't seen any evidence.
From what I understand, the fentanyl's not just coming from Venezuela and places like that. It's coming from Asia, China, it's other places too. It's and I think it's homegrown as well.
And what do you say to people who think that President Trump is overstepping his power by blowing up these drug boats?
What I say to them is, would you rather have them running around and building and amassing wealth and power and connections in that area? Or would you rather try to limit it and end the human trafficking, the drugs, the weapons, everything else running through there?
I would say, first of all, do your research into the Constitution, into the legality of what he's doing. Don't just listen to mainstream media. Really actually do the research yourself.
Our country is being attacked by the cartels, other governments. I think the Chinese government's involved with some of this fentanyl distribution. So I feel like we're being attacked by other countries, so we have to protect our country. That's what I would say.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. Louisiana sports were in full effect at the White House yesterday. President Trump honored NCAA baseball champs LSU and NAIA champs LSU Shreveport with a joint White House celebration. The LSU Tigers swept Coastal Carolina in the College World Series, while the LSU Shreveport Pilots had a perfect 59-0 record on their way to the title. The Pilots' standout pitcher Isaac Rode was named 2025 ABCA Rawling NAIA Pitcher of the Year. The Tigers championship team also included 9 players selected in the 2025 Major League Baseball draft. This is LSU's 8th national championship. Only USC with 12 has won more College World Series titles.
We'll have the most beautiful ballroom in the country.
During his remarks to the college athletes, Trump also mentioned that construction on the White House ballroom had begun. The White House started tearing down part of the East Wing yesterday. Trump said construction of the ballroom will be funded privately by the president as well as other donors, with no taxpayer funds involved. The White House says it does not need approval from the National Capital Planning Commission for the demolition work, only for new construction. The commission, though, has not approved the construction, and it was unclear whether the White House had submitted the ballroom plans to the agency. The 90,000 square foot ballroom is expected to cost more than $200 million. Trump says it will hold up to 999 people. And the Toronto Blue Jays are heading back to the World Series for the first time since 1993 after a dramatic 4-3 win over the Seattle Mariners last night. George Springer launched a go-ahead 3-run homer in the 7th inning, his 23rd career postseason blast, lifting Toronto to victory and clinching the American League pennant. Here's the Blue Jays manager after the victory.
Pretty cool. Pretty humbled to be part of it, you know what I mean? I've said it before, besides my wife and kids, this is what I pour my life into. So to be leading the team that's going back to the World Series for the first time in 32 years kind of hits me a little bit. And I couldn't be happier for every single guy on the team and in the clubhouse, not just the players but the staff too. So we're gonna enjoy tonight big time, you know, and realize how hard it is to get here, and then get back to work and get ready for the Dodgers.
Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was named American League Championship Series MVP after hitting a 385 with 3 home runs and 3 doubles in the series. The Blue Jays will now face the Los Angeles Dodgers in Game 1 of the World Series on Friday in Toronto. Seattle's Julio Rodriguez and Cal Raleigh each homered But the Mariners fell just one win short of their first ever World Series appearance. Toronto, perfect in its two previous World Series trips in '92 and '93, is now looking to stay undefeated on baseball's biggest stage, the World Series. An American pianist, Eric Liu, won the top prize at the prestigious International Chopin Piano Competition in Warsaw today. The decision came after hours of deliberations by a 17-person international jury, chaired by American pianist Garrick Olson.
I'm so grateful for this honor. I'm grateful for all the Chopin lovers around the world who watched online and all the audience here in Warsaw. I'm grateful for the jury to bestow me this honor. And yeah, this is a dream come true, of course.
As the winner of the 19th edition of the competition, Liu will receive nearly $70,000 in prize money and a gold medal funded by the President of Poland. 27-year-old Liu is a graduate of the Curtis Institute, and he's previously won the Leeds International Piano Competition in 2018 and has performed with the various symphony orchestras, including in Boston, London, and Chicago. The second prize went to Canada's Kevin Chen, while China's Zitong Wang came in third place. The nearly 100-year-old event is named after the famous Polish composer Frédéric Chopin and is held every 5 years in Warsaw around October 17th, the anniversary of Chopin's death. Congratulations to Liu. What an achievement. And a new Pew Research Center survey shows more Americans believe religion is now gaining influence in national life than at any point in the last 15 years. According to the study, the share of adults who say religious influence is growing jumped from 18 to 31% over the past year. While most Americans still think religion is losing ground, that number has fallen sharply from 80% last year to 64% this year. According to Pew, perception about faith's role has risen across nearly every age, political, and religious group. 59% of Americans now say religion's influence is positive, marking a major shift in recent years. That's all we have for the hour. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us. Thank you.